So, it's the 1910s. The top baby names for females were Mary, Helen, and Dorothy. The average life expectancy in the US was about 50 years, and the first film version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein had just came out a few years prior, as well as the first version of The Wizard of Oz. The word moron had just been coined by Henry H. Goddard, as well as 1 + 1 was proven to be 2. In most cities, the average speed limit was set to 10 to 12 miles per hour. You wouldn't want to accidentally run into each other's horses, right? The unemployment rate skyrocketed to 16.4% in 1914, doubling the previous year's 8.2% in the US. The 1910s were a great decade, right? Well, if you consider the worst war at the time to be great, then yeah, sure. It wasn't called the Great War for nothing, right? So, who was in it? What started it? And what happened after the war? The year is 1914, and Archduke Franz Ferdinand from somewhere in Europe, also known as Austria-Hungary, visited Bosnia in southern Europe. He and his wife were yeeted, aka assassinated, by a Serbian nationalist in June because he didn't want their rule in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Austria-Hungary and a few other countries didn't like this, so they blamed the Serbian government. They waited a bit before declaring war because big bad Russia was on Serbia's side, as well as France and Britain. The German leader, Kaiser Wilhelm II, reassured Austria-Hungary that they would support them. War was then declared after an ultimatum was sent to Serbia, who didn't like what was said. On July 28th, the war began. Within a week, peace in Europe was no more. Russia, Belgium, France, and Great Britain teamed up with Serbia to form the Allied powers against Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire, who called themselves Central Powers, which admittedly isn't as cool as Serbia's team name. Germany had this great idea to use the Schlieffen Plan, aka having 2 fronts, one in the east confronting big bad Russia and one in the west confronting France. So on August 4th, Germany and its troops went into Belgium to cross into France. However, Belgium was neutral at this point and Germany didn't care, so the Germans yeeted a whole Belgian city with siege cannons. Belgium didn't like this obviously, so they tried to resist, but Germany was like, well okay, pew pew pew, that is, shooting everyone who resisted them, even civilians. By September 6, Germany had come within 30 miles of Paris. French and British forces launched a successful counterattack against Germany, which resulted in a temporary victory dance by France and Britain. This drove the Germans back north and resulted in the infamous trench wars that lasted more than 3 years. Russian forces invaded eastern Prussia and Poland in August of 1914, but Germany didn't approve of this, so they stopped the Russians. Though Germany and Austria won that particular battle, Germany had to move quite a few soldiers from the Western Front to the Eastern Front, resulting in the loss in France. Germany thought that with the Schlieffen Plan, that because they moved quickly at 2 fronts, the war would be yeeted in their favor. They had just not anticipated France's fierce resistance or the Russians' ability to mobilize so quickly. After a stalemate in Europe in 1914, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers. Allied forces tried to gain control of the Gallipoli Peninsula in April of 1915. This proved to be too difficult, so in January of 1916, the Allied forces yeeted themselves out of there after suffering 250 casualties. This was not the only time the Allied forces fought the Ottomans. Battles also occurred in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Italy joined the war on Allied side in spring of 1915. Battles between Italian and Austrian forces was fought in northern Italy along the Isonzo River. After a defeat in 1917 against Austrian and German forces, Britain and France, and later the US, jumped in to help Italy regain control of the area. Britain had an unchallenged Royal Navy. No other nation's fleet was quite big or offensive enough to break through. Germany tried to bulk up in numbers and in strength. Britain mounted a surprise naval attack in the North Sea on Germany in 1915. They soon realized the Britain's navy was too strong and instead opted to bulk up on the U-boats. The biggest conflict happened in May of 1916 at the Battle of Jutland off the coast of Denmark in the North Sea. This involved 250 ships and 100,000 men. Britain won the conflict, and Germany would make no other attempt at naval combat for the duration of the war. It's 1917, and Russia's army had tried to break into Germany for about 2 years, but every assault had failed. Tension in Russia grew because of the economic instability and the scarcity of resources. This led to increased hostility towards Tsar Nicholas II and his German wife. In 1917, the Russian Revolution began, and Russia had to halt their participation in the ongoing war. The revolution ended the Tsar's rule and put Vladimir Lenin in charge. President Woodrow Wilson preferred neutrality while still engaging in trading and shipping with European countries on both sides of the war. It became harder to maintain neutrality because of Germany's aggression toward neutral ships, including those with civilians. Germany sunk many neutral ships, including some US ships. The US population didn't like this and protested the neutrality in favor of war. In 1917, 2 years after the sinking of a British ocean liner with American civilians on board sparked uproar, the US Congress passed a bill intended to make the country ready for war. On April 2nd, President Wilson declared war against Germany. After the armistice with Russia because of the revolution, Germany could focus all the efforts on the Western Front in France. The Allied forces struggled to hold off on the German offensive until the aid from the US could arrive. On July 15, 1918, the Allies, with the help of 85,000 US soldiers, successfully yeeted back the German forces and even launched a counterattack a few days later. This made Germany cancel their plans to launch an offensive further north, which was their last hope of victory. This resulted in France and Belgium regaining what was lost 4 years prior. By the end of 1918, the Central Powers were unraveling on all fronts. Despite the victory at Gallipoli, the Ottoman Empire had quite a few defeats by other invading forces, while also having an Arab revolt at the same time. This resulted in the destruction of the Ottoman economy, forcing them to sign a treaty with the Allies in October 1918. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary was facing a growing nationalistic movement, forcing them to also sign an armistice on November 1918, just like Russia the year before. Germany tried to fight on, but with the few resources left, the discontent on the home front and the surrender of its allies, they were forced to seek an armistice on November 11, 1918, finally ending the war. In 1919, at the Paris Peace Conference, Allied leaders expressed their desires to build a post-war world that would prevent any further wars like this devastating one. Some participants began calling the Great War the war to end all wars, though as we know, that would not happen. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919. The League of Nations was formed and Germany was denied entrance, thus starting the German hatred of the Treaty of Versailles. But that's a story for another time. World War I was the deadliest war the Earth had seen yet, resulting in 9 million soldiers dead, 21 million wounded, and 10 million civilian casualties. The most affected countries were Germany and France, who had both sent 80% of their male population between 15 and 49 into battle. Hopefully you learned something today, and thanks for watching. Please leave any feedback for me in the comments, as I want to improve and help you learn something new.